Hey, I've like explained this before in more layman's terms, but I was just falling asleep and it popped into my mind, hey, I could totally graph that, man. So right at the top, this is thors. So we have time from 4 minutes all the way down to 12 minutes, and then we say that the military budget for Terran and Protoss is the same, right? So each of them gets 250 bucks per 30 seconds, and then 325, and then 500. So in general, Terran and Toss have somewhat close to the same amount of money. So then over here, we're gonna say up for Terran we've got Thors, and for Protoss we've got Stalkers, and this is when Warpgate Tech finishes. So queued up this round, this column E, we're gonna queue up a Thor at 5.5 minutes, and then 6.5 minutes, and then 7.5 minutes, because Thors take a full minute to build, and then the Thor that we queue up isn't going to be alive until 1 minute after it gets queued up, right? But Thors also have only a 1.8 move speed, so it's going to take them a full minute to walk to the enemy base. So the Thor that you queue up at 5.5 minutes isn't going to hit the enemy base until 7.5 minutes. So then we have defensive and offensive strength of each unit, right? The defensive strength of Thors is how many Thors do you have actually alive back in your own base, and the offensive strength is how many do you have alive capable of being in the enemy base. And then for Stalkers, because of Warp Gate tech, right here, the walk time is gonna change to 0 basically to get to the enemy base. So yeah, Jack, that's what I'm saying. So you'll notice the more expensive a unit is, the more unspent cash you're going to be floating at all times, right? Um, because you have to save up to 500 bucks to be able to queue up the next Thor. So there's going to be all this unspent money that's going to contribute to you having a smaller army size. Less expensive troops are going to have less unspent money. And then the build time also makes a really big difference. Dropping a whole minute of waiting for that Thor to pop out makes a significant difference. So then over here you just have army size, offensive army size of Thors in red, and Stalkers in yellow, and Marines in blue. And you can see even though Stalkers do get an advantage right here at 6.5 minutes of offensive army size, it's not that big of a deal versus Marines, because Marines have a very low cost and a very um, short build time. So in combination with those two things, it's like it hardly even matters that warp-in is an advantage. But things with a full minute build time like Ravens and Banshees and Thors, they come in way down here. Also, the slow movement speed and the long build time and the high cost, all three factors in the worst possible cases, makes the Thor, along with like battle cruiser, very low on army size. And so this matters a lot right here, like at 7 minutes when you have no offensive capability at all versus a ton. That's like a huge percentage difference, right? But the longer into the game you go, the difference between having this much and this much compared to this much and this much, it's like a bigger percentage uh, that the stalkers will have advantage over the Thors. So that's what this third chart is. I mean, this is offensive strength, this is defensive strength, and this is the big difference. So you can see when your first Thor pops out, you're still only 1/3 the army size of your opponent. Like, it's a big deal to have only one Thor at that time. And when your second Thor pops out, you're still only half the army size of the Protoss. But then when your third pops out, you're up to 70%, and when your fourth pops out, you're still at 70%, and then 77, and then 80. So the difference after your third Thor becomes kind of very slowly rising rather than quickly rising. So that's why when people do a Thor push in TVP or even TVZ, you wait for that third Thor, because that's when the discrepancy in army size has gotten the diminishing returns on the army size discrepancy has gotten smaller than reasonable. So that is at your third Thor defensively or your third Thor offensively. So at 9 minutes or 10 minutes, depending on if you're attacking or defending, is when you finally catch up in army strength on Thorage. One thing that people do a lot, or at least that I do a lot to mitigate this, you see how Marines have almost no discrepancy because of the low cost and low build time? Well, that means Hellions are the same way, right? They build quick and they walk quick, and they don't cost much. So what you can do is make those 3 thors and then stop making thors altogether and just produce marines and hellions, and then start walking the thors across the field and catch up with the marines and hellions. And so then by the time you get there, instead of having this 70% discrepancy, you'll be down to like 90% or something like that. So that is the concept I've tried to explain before, and hopefully this does a better job. And if it doesn't, oh well, whatever. So just remember, same thing applies to any expensive unit: Colossus, Void Rays, Immortals, Ultralisks, anything with a long build time that's expensive or that is slow. All those things kind of add together to make a big army size discrepancy. Pew pew.